Started a minute or two early, given your extraordinary punctuality. Of course, if this was class, it'd be something different. But speaking of class, and since we're being broadcast, people would want to know the Yale erudition and just how classy you folks all are. Extra credit for anybody in here who could name the piece that we were just playing. Anybody know it? Hey, who did that? Oh, Pete, of course. Our musicologist, our president, Peter Zelenskyy. And what movement, President Zelenskyy? It's, yes, that's the one. It's Gates of Kiev. Wow. Extra, can I give my boss, well, it's actually not my boss, to tell you the truth. It's not my boss's boss. It's my boss's boss's boss. So when you hear how streamlined an introduction I'm about to give him, you'll think, well, this is the last time we ever see Professor Sonnenfeld again. But we will be introducing President Zelenskyy and some other distinguished guests at 1:15. What are we going to do between now and then? Going to put you in a cheerful holiday spirit. Sadly, actually, no. But this is some material we just got from Kiev to share with you. If we could go back on to my laptop, please. And if we could just have some sound. The sound is, of course, I'm the one who has the sound.
Are there cities in the world full of ancient grandeur and strange aching simplicity, where people smile at the stranger, where the streets and embankments bask in the sun, and elegant squares bathe in fountains? Is there a country of happy people in the world where our children build sandcastles, where people love to the core, and the wind blows in the faces of travelers? Are there people in the world who conscientiously do their work, kindred work, each in his place? People who build their own country as it should be. Is there a future in the world that suits us better, where we would rejoice in our victories, grow in the faith of our ancestors, where we would gather together with the whole world at one table? Be proud of our Cossack character, our independence, our defenders. Where we would look to the sky, looking for our dream there. Is there such a word in the world to describe all this? Yes, there is. And this word is Ukraine. But at dawn, a week before spring, it was all taken away from us.
Good.
Yes, the war took a lot from us, but the time will come when we will regain everything.
Thank you. I doubt that there are many dry eyes in the room. I have to admit, kind of a softie. I have trouble watching this myself. I'm sorry to start with something that moves from horrors and such a sober beginning to our discussion, but it's not maudlin, it's real. This is a special moment, of course, for Yale. It's a special moment, a special period for Ukraine. We're very fortunate to welcome shortly, as the president of Yale will introduce our heroic leader, President Zelenskyy, But we got involved very early on. President Zelenskyy actually did join a Yale event in June, in part because he wanted to reach corporate leaders, and it was his first live interactive discussion, unscripted, not an appeal, not a call to action. It was a discussion with corporate leaders from Citigroup to Ethan Allen to you name it, Chobani, Goldman Sachs, and as quite a cross section. But he wanted to talk to students, particularly students from the U.S., to reach different audiences. But of course, we have a very a diverse group here today, and hope to hear from many of you. But many of you, if you can see in the back of the room, there are 42 Yale students who jumped on board to volunteer selfie. You guys want to raise your hands, as a corporate social impact club, as people who are graduate students in arts and sciences, a huge section, of course, from the School of Management, undergraduates that have been working very hard as we profiled from the safety and comfort that we have here, obviously not being in a battle zone, still doing what we could to try to profile the multinational companies that were still staying there and those leaving. And we're told that it helped trigger the largest mass exodus of multinationals in world history. No economic boycott has ever, or any blockade has ever equaled this. And of course, we have a historian here to correct me if I'm wrong when I introduce Professor Schneider a little bit later. But it had a huge impact. And then the same team went off to puncture President Putin's propaganda suggesting the Russian economy was resilient. It's imploding. We had to correct the IMF, macroeconomists around the world about the truth. This team did that research and changed the narrative there too, and work we're doing now on the energy industry and the self-reliance that the EU has and the US and the West to make sure we do have that resilience still there. That's all I just want to say as my own opening, because I just wanted to pay tribute to all the Yale people who have been working since February 24th on this front. I'd like to ask President, if you want to clap them, thank you, yeah. Kayla Tausche from CNBC was saying never trip over an applause line. I'm so sorry. Peter Salovey, the 23rd president of Yale. Peter, if you please come on up and join us. President Salovey. We have online, but she'll be visiting with us on another occasion, Ukraine ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Oksana Markova. Thank you for joining us, but she'll be monitoring. Thank you, Ms. Ambassador. We have Senator Richard Blumenthal, the senior senator from Connecticut, a former attorney general in Connecticut, who is on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I think if we could beam him in, if that's possible, we'll see if the connections work here. Senator Blumenthal, welcome. I guess we'll have to, there he is. And Senator Graham, wonderful, Senator Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina, who Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal have been leaders on the issues that we're wrestling with this in the next hour. They both serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. As many of you know, Senator Graham formerly chaired the Senate Judiciary Committee and currently chairs the Senate Budget Committee. But of particular note is they both somehow found the time and courage to go into Kyiv in early July, and we really appreciate them in the cause that they've led. We're going to be hearing from them a little bit into the discussion as we get going today. And then Kayla Tausche. Kayla, welcome so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Kayla from CNBC, who is the senior White House correspondent from CNBC. And then my great colleague who's joined me in many issues on the frontiers of the battles for democracy, as we're all in his shadows, is our leading authority on autocracy, democracy, Central Eastern Europe, but the world in general, Professor Tim Snyder, the Richard Levin Professor of History. Thank you, all of you. President Salovey always resents my long, flowery introduction, so this is one time where I'll actually honor your request. President Salovey, as you know, it should be one that encouraged us to all sob at that opening video because, in fact, he is coined the term emotional intelligence. He's been a great psychologist with many work on the frontiers of public health, but in particular in understanding emotional intelligence. And I want to thank Peter. I hope that was okay what I opened with. Thank you, President Zelenskyy.
Great.
Kind of spotty, but it seems to work.
Yeah, I'm able to see it.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Good morning to everyone. I'm so glad you're all here today. Thank you for joining us. I'm pleased to see so many faculty members, students, scholars, staff, practitioners, all here today. I very much appreciate that we're joined by U.S. Senators Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham. And I'm grateful that the Yale School of Management and you, Jeff, made this special event possible. Today, we are very fortunate that President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has made time in his schedule to address the Yale community. He joins us live from Kyiv at a critical juncture in the conflict. This week, Vladimir Putin's unprovoked and unjustified invasion eclipsed the 8-month mark. And as the winter season approaches, Ukraine must recover and rebuild amid continued aggression, including the Russian government's ruthless attacks on its utilities and its energy infrastructure. So before I turn the program over to President Zelenskyy, I would like to reaffirm Yale's steadfast support for members of our Ukrainian community and those Yale students and scholars from elsewhere in the region. As I remarked at a vigil that we held at the outset of this crisis, we're compelled by our common sense of humanity to reject Putin's violence in the strongest terms. We stand for peace, we grieve for lives lost, and we will continue to support individual students in any capacity we can as our scholars also help policymakers chart a path toward peace. Of course, President Zelenskyy, I join the Yale community in admiration for the bravery of the Ukrainian people and for the untiring leadership you have provided them. More than safeguard your homeland and people's right to self-determination, you have also defended the democratic ideals that we hold dear. More than marshal the patriotism of a country, you have roused the conscience of a global community. And more than make history against odds, you have shaped our shared future against the forces of aggression. It is now my great pleasure and a great honor to invite you, Mr. President, to share with us your reflections. Please join me in welcoming President Zelenskyy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. I am very honored to address you today. Thank you for your warm welcome words, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Senators. We do know you. Thank you for supporting us. I'd like to thank all the professorial community, studentship at the university. So, dear friends, I'm glad to welcome you. Thank you for your interest in and attention to Ukraine. I watched the video, a nice one, made wholeheartedly about Ukraine. Quite a tragic one, beautiful yet tragic, but you saw it yourselves. No more comments. How to assess it? What are the details about? I think it will be possible for us during the Q&A session. I will also offer you a short video later on. So really, we are going to have Q&A session later on. So I will try not to spend much of your time in order for as many of you as possible to express your thoughts. I think All of you know what is happening in Ukraine. You know of the cruel war that Russia is waging against us. Harsh and violent. And actually, thanks to the fact that your university has Professor Timothy Snyder working with you, a prominent personality, a prominent historian, I think you can easily know all the details of why Russia has been acting the way it has been and why did they start exactly from Ukraine. I will explain the situation in general. For Russia, this is war not just to grab our land, not just to destroy our statehood, not just to spread the imperial influence. There's something more to it. With its terror, Russia tries to destroy something that has always been reborn in our people, in spite of all the wars we had, in spite of all the invaders that entered the land of ours, even in spite of this Kremlin-inspired genocide policy against the Ukrainians that the 20th century saw. One of its topmost manifestations was Holodomor, an artificial famine launched against the people. Ukrainians had to go through really horrible things, yet they have been able to retain their ability to stay unbowed, their will for freedom, their internal surety that it is the people who is the source of power on any land, not the Tsar with its throne, not a power, not wealth, but people. And it's very important that Ukraine has the potential to defend this fundamental democratic spirit, not just for itself, but also for other people in our part of the world. This is where the real front line is, not just for Ukraine. The Tsar throne against the will for freedom. The army of those who've been devoid of freedom since the time this current government went to power in Russia, against the defensive forces of those who surely know that freedom makes everyone strong. We are really different on the battlefield in Ukraine now. Every Ukrainian military unit has guardian angels in the rear, people able to help with anything our servicemen might need. This is a constant direct link between the defense forces and the society. Can you see something like that in Russia? No, nothing like that. That direct link goes probably just through the televised propaganda of hatred. Meanwhile, our field commanders are completely free to make their own decisions during holding these military operations. And they use this freedom deciding how to act in the most efficient way at any given moment. Meanwhile, Russian commanders are trembling in expectation of the orders from the top. And sometimes they spend months trying to comply with knowingly hopeless orders, sending their own people as cannon fodder to imminent deaths. After our defense forces liberate territories, the area sees mine-clearing personnel, has repairmen, has other personnel that become busy trying to bring normal life to people. Meanwhile, the Russian flag they tried to instill on temporarily occupied territories was only the symbol of mass graves, torture houses, deportations, filtration camps, and total disrepair. You can just imagine that Russian invaders are taking Ukrainian books out of libraries to destroy them. They destroy everything that even remotely reminds about Ukraine. Already 51 Ukrainian universities suffered from Russian missile and artillery strikes. At checkpoints, infiltration camps, Russian soldiers make strip searches of people to identify even slightest symbols of Ukraine, tattoos or some national symbol. You can have a yellow and blue ribbon on your backpack, and this might be a valid reason for Russian military to detain, torture, or kill. There have been hundreds of thousands of such cases. Why? Because everything Ukrainian is a target in the crosshairs of Russia. Russia is fighting against freedom, destroying everything Ukrainian and the Ukrainians. This is how they perceive it in the Kremlin. They need to destroy the people and the freedoms. They don't believe they can subjugate Ukraine in the other way. This is why they addressed Iran, asking for weapons, asking for those killer drones and missiles, because Russia has not enough terror means. And you can see where these Iranian drones are aimed at. These drones are aimed against power plants, boiler plants, transport means, even residential houses. They want to destroy everything Ukrainian, everything, every manifestation of Ukrainianship. And this is exactly the point where we see the strategic threat from the Russian aggression, because after Ukraine and everything Ukrainian, Russia will, in the same vein, try to destroy something Polish, something Georgian, everything that belongs to people on the vast territory from the north of Europe to Kazakhstan. This is why we say that it is important for the whole of the world to see that Russia loses this time in this war in Ukraine. When we gain victory for ourselves, we will gain it also for other people, for those whose freedoms are potentially under threat. And let me just show you a little video to better understand my words.
This was created overnight. He did this to show what's happening here right now.
This was the video to show what we are going to spare Ukraine and other parts of the world when we get rid of Russian invaders. And we do hope for our security guarantee for all of us. This video was a picture of our survival under Russian terrorist strikes just throughout this month of October. Meanwhile, the full-scale war has been drawing on for 9 months. Dear friends, on behalf of the Ukrainian people, I'd like to thank your people for the support you've been providing our defense forces with. I'd like to thank your leaders, President Biden, both chambers of commerce, both parties at the Congress, public figures, business persons who share the feeling that it is important for Ukrainian democracy to stay strong. I'm very much sure that Russia has no chance of winning this war, destroying our people. But the sooner we stop Russia, the better and the stronger will be our cooperation. The more threats from Russia we have, the more and the deeper our interaction should be. The more escalation steps Russia commits, the more we will have to do our steps in response to defend our freedoms and our people. We should not step back. We should not put something on hold. We should not give Russia even the smallest hope that its terror can work. It is exactly right now in Ukraine where it is decided whether our part of the world will remain free and democratic. And this will ultimately identify the global fate of the democracy. It is for us to decide the future of the free world, not for Russia. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, before we go to the students and the senators for some questions, we were going to give Kayla Tausche of CNBC the opening question. And Kayla, I just wanted to mention to you, coming from the world of video production, that was just created overnight for this event. It's a unique video. Nobody on the planet has seen what you just saw before. That's the situation now in Kyiv, and it's very, very powerful and distressing. But sorry for the interruption, Kayla.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the leadership at Yale for having me, for the esteemed diplomats and lawmakers who are joining us, and especially to President Zelenskyy for allowing me to be here to ask you these questions. I'll start with an impassioned plea that you made to the leaders of the G7 countries back in June to end the war by the winter. The winter is now approaching, and as the war goes on, everyone from progressive Democrats here in the U.S. to public figures like Elon Musk have made their own suggestions about how the war should end. At this point, will the war end with a battle or a negotiation, and when?
Thank you.
Negotiation after a battle.
Дуже дякую вам, Павлі, за це відео.
Thank you for your video as well, and for this really helps to communicate with the public. Unfortunately, however tragic it might look, it cannot describe 100% what has been happening here. The reality is much harder, much horrible, and the reality is much horrible in many respects. So coming back to how to end the war, it's a complex thing because it depends on multiple factors. We've shown our resilience as the people. We continue. We are motivated by being the Ukrainians, by being the citizens of this country, from different walks of life, from different nationalities, but we are motivated with what we have, and we defend what we have. This is what depends on us. This is our end target, and we are going there. It is also very much dependent on our partners. I've spoke thanking the leaders of your country, their own party, the opposition. I'd like to take the chance to also thank your colleagues, the journalists, those who have been communicating the stories and making sure that the public, the society, does not forget about the war. This really translates into support which needs to be. It is also depending on the public in the Russian Federation. And for this, a powerful sanction-based pressure should be exerted on Russia for them in Russia also to understand that they also are responsible for the political choice of the political leaders who decided to bring terror to the land of my country. So many factors are at play, and this all is united in just one principle, the principle of willingness. Willingness, when we all will be willing to end the war, it will end, and it will end soon, probably. It all depends on how willing we are, on our inner motivation. Now all of us are Ukrainians because it is the Ukrainians who are fighting for the values in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Africa, everywhere. In every country that deems itself a civilized country, a civilized society, a civilized democracy. So this depends on our joint will.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kayla, any response on that? Certainly, you heard it here first. The headline is, it's going to end soon. I heard that.
Yes, but President Zelenskyy, you have said that you will negotiate, but not with Mr. Putin directly. So are you suggesting that there should be a different channel of negotiations, or are you suggesting that the West should push for regime change?
Знаєте, мені в цілому вже складно сказати, хто такий.
You know, it is increasingly challenging for me to tell who or what is President Putin. Now it looks like this is like a bunch of individuals under the brand of Putin.
That's true, actually.
Who pursue aggressive steps. So we are not ready to talk to Putin. We are not to talk in general with a regime like this, with an approach like this, with this disrespect to sovereignty, to the freedom of our citizens, to our choice, to our territorial integrity. And the disrespect is demonstrated in a very clear way. There are military guys who are in our territories, within our borders, and they're killing here. So the first step should be get away from our land, from our territories. Another thing, it depends on how you're going to leave the country. Are you expecting us to push you from here? This will be one thing, and this will make for one format of the dialogue, if it happens, if it is possible. Another thing is when one goes voluntarily away, then it may be another sort of transition from war towards diplomacy. And I think it depends more on the military and political leadership of Russia, on the Russian Federation, what their choice is. And unfortunately, this is not the choice they made for us, because for us, they've reserved the extermination. This is the form of dialogue that they have to choose for their own public, for their own society. Just they have to think for how long their society will be de facto isolated from the rest of the world. For a decade, couple of decades, for 1,000 years or 100. They have their hands in blood, and it will be really a challenge to clean those hands. They have children's blood on their hands.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to, if we can find the student, if you guys have the mic runners, can locate in the room, because all we see are lights in front of us. Alexandra Baker Brown, if you're here, can you find her? I think it looks like you're finding her. Alexandra's a first-year MBA from San Francisco. I think a Berkeley econ major. Alexandra, we find you?
President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for being here with us today. The Ukrainian military and civilians have shown absolutely remarkable resolve and tenacity in the face of the Russian invasion. How have you maintained a spirit of optimism and motivated the Ukrainian people in the face of the invasion and the atrocities that they have undergone?
Thank you, Alexandra.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for the question. You know, to bring optimism to someone, you have to be optimist yourself. And I'm the optimist. I do believe in my own country, in my family, in my people, in our servicemen. And I think patriotism is also optimism combined with the belief in your own country, in your own nation. So for me, my nation is the best. In the same vein, your nation is the best for you, for everyone at this whole. And it's nice. This way we respect each other and we are patriots of our own nations, and this is a good thing. And there is optimism in that. Some might say that, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side, or maybe in the other nation. I conversely think that it may be beautiful elsewhere, but my country, my homeland is the best, which makes the best motivation for me. And I try to impart this energy to everyone I talk to everyone I communicate, to the people in my country, including the servicemen, the military, and people in different sectors, because really the country is defended by just everyone. So our key motivation is our home. We have no other home. But again, just pay attention that we are not going or waging war against any other country or nation. We don't need anything from else. We just defend what is ours.
Well, thank you. Just as an aside, as you mentioned, grass being always greener, the agricultural triumphs in the midst of having the railways bombed, the silos bombed, people planting fields, sowing the seeds, and then harvesting, despite the rain not being so great right now. It's a bumper crop in Ukraine that's approaching, in fact, what Russia produces, and same with the U.S. and Canada. There's a food problem, a famine problem that's possible, certainly a drought problem in Africa that's horrific, a 70-year problem. It's not caused by Ukraine. It's a food distribution problem the whole rest of the world has to take on, and I just want to mention that as the grass is always greener, President Putin's trying to blame Ukraine or the West for attention. We need to focus on Africa. Jay Rosenberg, are you here? Jay is, I think, a first-year MBA, Boston College?
Yes, sir.
Vanguard star?
Former Vanguard, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, thank you for your time, your sacrifice, and the willingness to answer our questions. In this war, as I mentioned, you and other Ukrainians have sacrificed their well-being, safety, and for many, ultimately their lives in the name of freedom. What do you say to convince political leaders and citizens of other nations to make a sacrifice, even a small one, in order to further contribute to your cause so that you and your people may find victory and peace?
I'm so sorry. I think I didn't have correct translation, and I think I don't hear in English.
Do you want to just ask it again?
Can you just repeat? Maybe
yes,
I don't have.
You and your citizens have made.
Could you ask it in Ukrainian?
What did you say? I don't.
Yeah. No, it was a joke. Sorry.
You and your citizens have made a significant sacrifice. And I ask you, what do you say to convince political leaders and citizens of other nations to make a sacrifice, even a small one, in order to further contribute to your cause and the cause of the Ukrainian people so that you may find victory and peace?
You did better the second time. Thank you. How do you convince world leaders, political leaders, to care? Translator.
Дякую за запитання, чи за два запитання, або навіть...
Thank you for the question. 2 questions, maybe even 3 questions. Let me offer you one answer. I want you to understand it real clear. I don't think that the fact that we defend Ukraine, that we are doing this as a sacrifice, it is not quite like this. This is not a sacrifice. This is our responsibility because we really love our country. And you defend your country, you defend your love to it in the same vein as you would defend your family or maybe your beloved one. So this is not a sacrifice when you have to defend something or somebody you can't live without. So we are not sacrificing anything. We are just defending what we love. As regards leaders that I'm convincing, now the story looks a bit different. Now we do sacrifice our lives for the life of other nations. We do respect them, but we love our own nation. And other leaders have to understand when we are no longer able to stand in defense, the enemy will go to their land, to their nation, and it will be them who will have to spend their lives defending what is dear to them. So from their side, it is not a sacrifice either. It's the assistance for us to keep the peace for them, for other nations. If my understanding of your question was correct. Sorry if I answered another question.
Thank you. I think that was an excellent explanation as we understood the question. Ling Jiaozhu is Ling Jiaozhu. You can find there we are, right here. Second year MBA.
Hello. Thank you, President Zelenskyy. It's very nice to meet you on Zoom. My name is Ling Xiaoxu. I'm a second-year student at SOM. So my question is, what is your opinion of Chinese leader Xi's third term and the political impact of CCP to Ukraine people, ceasefire, and the rebuilding of Ukraine? Thank you.
Дякую за запитання. А що я думаю про...
Thank you for the question. Regarding the third term, I think it would be beyond my capacity. This is quite a long time to... As regards just my attitude, if you will, I mentioned it once. I would really like to see that Chinese society, Chinese public, and Chinese government support the Ukrainian country. We have a history of positive, in-depth relations, also economic ones. The biggest exchange, economic exchange, goods exchange, before the war was between, in Ukraine, was with China. And I would really like to see these relations continue, particularly in the time when we have problems, we have budget deficit. And I would really like to see that Chinese position regarding support of Ukraine is much more clear. I definitely would not want this country to go supporting and defending Russian aggressive regime. This is my only wish.
Well, thank you. It is noteworthy that at the outbreak of war, despite the equivocation, if not apparent Putin leading of President Xi Jinping, is that in fact the largest petrochemical companies in China, which are among the largest in the world, Sinopec and Sinochem, immediately cut off all ties with the outbreak of war. Similarly, the largest financial institutions, probably larger than any institutions most of you will work for or even use, the Bank of China and ICBC, which is bigger than anybody in New York, cut off all lending, all ties with China immediately with the outbreak of war. So it's not what you would expect. I'd like to hear from Senator Blumenthal. We go to the two senators at this point as we take a look at enlisting the support of political leaders. Certainly, you heard a few responses from President Zelenskyy on how the appeal and the self-interest of other nations should be recognized here. But we do have dissent within each of our major political parties that we hear from time to time. Senator Blumenthal, any views on how things have changed since your visit to Kyiv in July?
Thank you so much, Jeff Sonnenfeld, and to Yale. I'm a very proud graduate of Yale Law School, but coming to you from Quinebaug Valley Community College in Danielson, Connecticut, where there is a very, very large concentration of American veterans who have fought for our freedom, just as your brave, fierce fighters in Ukraine, President Zelenskyy, are fighting for your homeland. And very simply, we are in awe, immensely grateful, but awestruck by your courage and strength, as I have told you on the 2 occasions this year that I have visited with my colleague, Senator Graham. And most recently in July, I want to thank Senator Graham particularly for his leadership. As you know, when we visited you, President Zelenskyy, we presented you with the resolution passed unanimously by the United States Senate. Senator Graham and I led it to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, which would mean, if the administration follows it, that Russia would be one of the pariah states, a handful of states like North Korea and Syria, who are sanctioned, they are vulnerable to action in our courts, and it would be a real marker, and that's why we are working so hard to support you, because you are at the tip of the spear. You are defending our national security, because we know that Putin will keep going. He will continue to threaten NATO if he is permitted to conquer Ukraine. I would also remind you, when we spoke in July, you told us that there would be a counteroffensive, and there has been, and it is going very, very well. It has been successful beyond the expectations of many of our own military leaders. And you predicted also that you would need air defense in your country, because Putin would bomb, he would attack by drones your civilian facilities, schools, hospitals, power plants. And that is exactly what he is doing now, trying to, in effect, bloody the people of Ukraine, destroy its infrastructure, and thereby undermine its morale. And just yesterday, his speech was designed to divide our own nation. But let me tell you, President Zelenskyy, that in my view, and I think there's bipartisan support for this idea, there should be no negotiations without you and the people of Ukraine. You should be the one to decide when, whether, and where there can be negotiation. We should not pull back at this point. We should not be talking about diminishing our support. We should be redoubling our support, particularly when it comes to air defenses, so that your people are protected against this genocidal attack. When Senator Graham and I visited, we went to the mass graves in Bucha, and as heartrending and gut-wrenching as that video was, I will tell you, even more so were our visits to Bucha and the towns around Kyiv, and now we are uncovering more atrocities. Putin is a thug. He's a war criminal. He's committing genocide. And we must bring him to justice. So I want to close just by saying that, as you very correctly observed, freedom is not a thing. It's not a physical structure. It's not a power plant. Putin can bomb them. He can destroy them. But he cannot destroy your freedom as long as the people of the world are behind you, as they are now. And I would like to know from you, in addition to the artillery that we are providing, the kinds of long-range, multiple-launch artillery, and the drones and tanks, would you welcome better air defense, for example, against Belarus, better air defense against the Russian missiles and planes, the possibility of Patriot defense mechanisms? And what I would suggest is that we take some of what we're sending to Saudi Arabia and redirect it, a halt to the arms to Saudi Arabia, redirect those arms to your country, which is right now defending the security of your people, but also that fight involves our own national security.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And before, maybe, Mr. President, before you respond to that, as it might be nice, since you showed us how adroitly you could do a three questions at once. Why don't we try two at once? Because I saw Senator Graham nodding in agreement on those points. So maybe Senator Graham would like to add some additional perspectives to the points you made. And also, Senator Graham, if you would, of course, as you heard the prospective Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, depending on how things work out in the next 11 days, said that perhaps the time of the blank check for military and humanitarian support for Ukraine has passed. And how do you respond to that in light of what Senator Blumenthal just shared with us?
Well, number one, thank you for having me. This is probably as close as I'll ever get to attending Yale. The reason I didn't go is you wouldn't let me in. And you had admission requirements I couldn't meet. So congratulations for having high standards. President Zelenskyy, we're with you. You just hang in there, my friend. Things are going to work out here in Washington. A little bit about Dick. You know, we come from different political viewpoints on a lot of issues, but not this. I just want the people of Connecticut to know war is always a tough topic for anybody, but in democracies, we tend to get weary and want to, have things over, and I can understand that. But no one has been stronger and more consistent in supporting Ukraine against the Russians' invasion than Senator Blumenthal. We have been created together, and I just want to tell you, my friend, there are three fronts in Washington. In July, I went with Dick to visit President Zelenskyy, and here's what I wanted to accomplish by the end of 2022. I want another aid package in the omnibus bill before the new Congress takes over. I want that aid package to be robust militarily and economically. And to my Republican colleagues who don't want a blank check, that's fine. I'll be glad to sit down with you to make sure that the money goes where it should go and we have accountability for the money. But I promise you, the majority of Republican senators are fully committed to seeing this through, because if we don't get Ukraine right, there goes Taiwan. And if we don't get Ukraine right, this war continues in Europe. So when it comes to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, you either pay now or you pay later. And we're lucky to have allies like the Ukrainians that are willing to fight for freedom. This is really a proxy fight in many ways. So I predict on this phone call that before the new Congress is sworn in, there will be a robust package of military and economic assistance to the Ukraine. I hope tanks are included so you can repel the invaders quicker. Number two, I hope in this package by the end of the year, we have Russia designated as a state sponsor of terrorism or something like it, to let the Russian leadership around Putin know that we're not going to forgive and forget, that we're going to keep in place sanction regimes, but we're going to up our game. We're going to put Russia in a club of 5. I think Iran's in that club of state-sponsored terrorism. And we want the business community who may be watching this program to know you do business with Russia at your own peril. The third thing we want to do is to make war crimes real. If we forgive and forget, if all the war crimes committed by Putin and his forces are just forgotten because we're so tired of dealing with this, then you're destroying the rule-based society that came out of World War II. I'm going to The Hague next week with a group of senators, bipartisan senators, to talk with the International Criminal Court prosecutor, Mr. Khan, about what we can do to change our laws to provide more evidence and intelligence to the ICC to hold Russian war criminals accountable, including Putin himself. So my message when it comes to Ukraine is more aid, more economic isolation of Russia, and more support for war crimes which are being committed before our eyes. The consequences of not getting this right are enormous. The war continues. Putin wants to reconstruct the old Russian Empire. That means democracies that exist today will not exist tomorrow if we give up on Ukraine. I think the Chinese are watching what to do about Taiwan. And if Putin is beaten here and he suffers mightily, then I think Taiwan is in better shape than if we lose. Iran is all in, helping Putin. And I want to make sure the Iranians understand they are supporting a loser. So I am very optimistic that the Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, at the end of this year and next year, will continue to give economic and military aid to the Ukrainian military and people so they can win a war we all can't afford to lose. How does it end? Russia withdraws to the 1998 boundaries. The Budapest Memorandum signed by Russia and Ukraine in 1998 was based on Ukraine giving up the third largest nuclear force in the world for a guarantee of their sovereignty by Russia, and we and others signed that agreement. If we let Putin get away with this, it would be the biggest bait and switch of the 20th, 21st century. And the message will be, if you got nuclear weapons, you should never give them up. If you don't have nuclear weapons, you should probably get them. So what happens in Ukraine matters to all of us. And if you don't get that by now, you missed all of World War II.
Thank you, Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal.
If I can just second, I just want to second what Senator Graham just said about the need for another major package of aid before the end of the year. I would predict, and I think there'll be bipartisan commitment to that kind of major package of aid, which is why I asked especially about the air defense. But I agree with everything that Lindsay had just said. He said it better than I could. Obviously, my Yale degree didn't give me his eloquence, and he's doing just fine.
Well,
thanks for your kind words.
You can pass it over to him next time you're together in the Senate, but we'll certainly give you, Senator Graham, a certification of contribution to this event. But I would like to also then go back to the president, if we could, President Zelenskyy. I think we just heard a headline.
I hear my colleagues in Washington furiously typing up the stories of
what's the headline you want to ask President Zelenskyy coming out of that?
Well, I think that it is clear that there is bipartisan support to move forward with more aid packages, more defenses, more economic aid. Of course, now the challenge is going to be keeping the lights on with Russian missiles targeting the power grid. 30% of Kyiv doesn't have power. So how do you craft a package that can reach these critical needs quickly enough? And how much, President Zelenskyy, does this package need to be? How much do you need?
I think he's doing the arithmetic right now.
You have a right to remain silent.
A lot. A lot.
Я не рахую чужі гроші.
No, I'm not counting. Particularly, it's not our money. But first of all, just to react to Senators' words, I'd like to start by thanking for the aid packages from the United States to Ukraine. And definitely, I admire the unity in the Congress regarding that. I'm glad to see that Ukraine has been a contributing party to find, for two parties represented in Congress, in Senate, to find common ways of cooperation. But, going back to recent strikes, the key strikes of late, they were really about the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and to be more exact, up to 40% of power-related infrastructure has been affected. So from 10th of October, we had not just Russian missiles, but also drones manufactured by Iran sent against us. We had 400 Iranian drones since 10th of October. And for the whole period of war, we've been with thousands of Russian missiles. Because of that, air defense matters are of priority, are of importance, because this is the key handicap for our people currently staying abroad that prevents them from going back home to see kids return to schools, universities. We need to defend civilians, and from here, the aerial defense is of priority for us. As Senator mentioned it, Patriots, are of extreme priority for us, and you mentioned Patriots. If you would say, yes, we can give you Patriots, I would go myself to the US for them. It's really important for our people. So how the whole system works in general, the United States assists us, Europe assists us, but the US definitely is the leader, trendsetter in this assistance. We had not enough artillery, 155 millimeters, not enough barrels. Then US were trailblazing on that, and then others joined. That's why the US opened a window of opportunity for other European countries to support. Then the matter of tanks. Unfortunately, we haven't got any tanks from the US. We would love to see Abrams here, but if there would be a possibility, an opportunity, we already know the support that European countries could provide us with in terms of armored vehicles, tanks, etc. But again, the topmost priority is aerial defense. We have to defend our skies. If my memory serves me right, I've been telling that in the first days of the war, aviation and aerial defense. This is what we lack. We need to defend our skies, to defend our children. Russian can do nothing against us on land.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has, of course, been the fastest hour of my life and perhaps of yours as well. It's a great frustration. We have time for just one last quick one. If Tanya Tsunik is here, Tanya, right up front. How about that? Very impressive. Tanya is a Yale College student. Tanya, what country are you from?
I'm from Ukraine.
What a coincidence. I had no idea. Quick final question.
Yeah, President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for your time. I'm Tanya. I'm from Ukraine, small town of Pershatravensk in Dnipro region. And I just wanted first to say how truly proud I am that such a president represents Ukrainian people. It's a president we deserve, and I think you are the president who deserves to represent us. And my question is, how, like, after this war is won and after Ukraine wins, how do you imagine the reconstruction and the reformation of Ukraine? And when I say like the reconstruction, I mean both the immediate things that needs to be done on the ground locally, and also the reformation in the domestic politics and the international order in the international relations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you for your question. Please, you are from Dnipro region, right? I am from there. I hail from there. So we share the same small homeland. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure indeed. I'm proud to see students like you representing Ukraine in the United States and elsewhere in the world. It's very important. You know, the rebuilding, the recovery of our nation, we need to do everything to see students like you who currently represent our country abroad, for them, for you to have an opportunity and also the desire to come back and chip in, participate in this recovery. So we need to do the recovery in a way that will be not just be based on patriotism, you know, or your T-shirt color. I do see that you are patriotically minded. I think it should not be just about patriotism, but also it should be based on a big desire to build a country for yourself, the way you'd like it, for your friends, for your kids, for many generations to come. So the recovery of Ukraine is a big program we have. The first iteration was presented in Lugano conference. And then we had a conference on the recovery of Ukraine in Berlin. Then we are going to have a conference in Britain. So I'm very much sure that at some point we will reach the US with our conferences. But this is not just the matter of money. It's a matter of best practices, best experiences, best IT software, best scholars, best architects coming back to restore the country. We cannot go back just to the country we used to see and have before the war. We will have to reconsider it. First of all, the security. The security should be not just at the border. It should be upgraded and reviewed, but also inside the country. We'll have to live in different circumstances, in different conditions. We'll have to live with Russia on the other part of the border, with understanding what they're capable of. And because of that, we'll have to build a strong security system, including in schools, in hospitals, in other institutions, in shops. Second part, education. We are switching just to this. First, because of COVID, now because of the war, we've learned how to learn and study online, how to open businesses online, how to retrain and get another profession online, how to get another education online. It is cool to be able to socialize that way. It would be not cool to live online, but the opportunities that online capacities offer are good. And we see most of our public services already been offered online because of COVID, because of war, but also because of people's desire to live in the world of topmost, most progressive technologies, with less governmental influence, with less red tape, with more online opportunities. So we've become a technological savvy state already now. And practically all of the public services have been already digitized in the country. This is important. And this is not a priority. next, high level of, I would say, simplicity of doing business. Because Ukraine is trending now for a variety of reasons, because of war, lots of negatives related to war because of the loss of life and so on. On the other hand, the world has discovered Ukraine because of it. And we need not to lose on that trend. We need to capitalize on that respect of Ukraine. Also, in business terms, we need to see more businesses coming out in the country. And for that, business making, the doing of business in Ukraine should be simple, comprehensible, because without investments, we won't be able to build our country. Still more that the enemy robbed us of billions. And also it will create a platform for students, for science development. We paid less attention to our science for almost 30 years of our independence. And we need to do everything to see you and others like you to gladly come back and rediscover Ukraine. We have to do everything for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I know you don't have a long speech, Professor Schneider, and President Zelenskyy, whose head was nodding as we heard many opportunities for Yale to contribute on other dimensions and what was just said there. President Zelenskyy, in the interest of time, has graciously surrendered his closing comments to pass it over to our erudite, eloquent colleague with some thoughts just on what meaning we should take away, Tim.
Okay, thank you. So if I could pick a concept from what President Zelenskyy has said, the concept that I would pick would be freedom. And of course, freedom can mean rights. As Senator Lindsey Graham quite rightly said, we learned from the Second World War a great deal about rights and how we translate rights into international law. We have the concepts now of war of aggression. We have the concepts of crimes of war, the concept of genocide, all of which apply to this war, all of which apply to Ukraine. In that sense, freedom applies as freedom to have these rights. But as the American commander-in-chief during the Second World War rightly said, freedom also involves freedom from fear. Freedom from fear. Fear is what the Russian side has left. The fear in their own society, the fear they're trying to make the Ukrainians feel, and the fear they're trying to make us feel. The front line, the physical front line, can be entrusted to the Ukrainians. They're doing a remarkably good job with great intelligence and courage. But there's also a line within the rest of us, the line of fear. Are we afraid? Or, as President Zelenskyy suggested, can we take responsibility? Because for us, it's not really a sacrifice. It's a chance to take responsibility. We have a chance to take responsibility. I appreciated Tanya's question because ultimately freedom is about the future. Had the Ukrainians not fought, we would already have a much darker future than we have now. What we have now is a chance with the Ukrainians, with their victory, to open up much better futures for all of us. So I thank you very much, President Zelenskyy. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you. The sculpture you may have noticed there on the podium is actually not sculpture. It is a mortar shell targeted for the president, his friends, family, and fellow country people. It's just an example, and a Ukrainian friend painted it up with the patriotic colors and gave it to me. But that's, as you saw in those videos, a reminder of everyday life right now. I want to thank the inspiring words, of course, of the senators with their distinction and their courage in leading us through this difficult situation from the U.S. side. I want to thank Kayla for the time you spent with us and the sharpness of your questions. And I thought you elicited some great breakthroughs as well as some headlines along the way. President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for framing the issues right up front and for the warm welcome to us all. And in case anybody missed what we should have learned, I want to thank the professor for underscoring the lesson so we don't have to study. Our homework was just done for us as you put it all together. But there's, of course, one more person to thank, and that is if you had the time and you ever wanted to hear the most amazing, beautiful leadership tribute you'll ever hear, a non-leadership scholar, but a historian, is when we gave an award, our Legend in Leadership, to President Zelenskyy. It was Professor Snyder's description and definition of what leadership is what you just saw and heard right there. And I want to thank President Zelenskyy for his time, for his leadership, and I apologize to all of you that, unlike in the broadcast media world, I've run way over, but you're all just way too good. Thank you so much, all of you. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't get back. Tim, that was a great summary.
Thanks, Peter.
Very
Thanks.
inspiring.